Good afternoon, folks. Hope you're good. Hope you can hear me. I'm Jack Chew, and this is Chewing It Over. I'm delighted to have two guests on. That I won't leave it too long to draw them in from the waiting room. And so the Joes are here. You might have noticed, I think it might even be a couple of years ago now, but for some reason, across the MSK spectrum, we have many a high-profile Joe. We've got Joe Gibson, Joanne Elphinston Jo Turner, Joe Belton. I'm missing a few others. It was I realised weirdly that is the sort of crucial go-to name. So yeah, name your children Joe, folks, and they're going to do wonderful things. So I've got two of them with us today, and if I click a couple of buttons, as long as I've got things right, then hopefully I can bring them on. If this has gone live. I've really done my best to sort of schedule this for when it's meant to go out, which is next Wednesday. But if it's live, we're just rolling with it. Okay. So apologies if it's working, but then you're in for a treat. You're getting it a week early, which from what I can tell, it seems to be, and it seems to be people are tuning in. But anyway, the times and the dates are going to be wrong on it. It says the 7th to the 5th. So we are not time travelers, but we're going for it. And so if I click these two buttons, hopefully I will be joined by Joe and Joanne. To make it easier for us to call you Joe and Joanne, won't it? That'd be simpler. So I'll try and refer to you as such. Thanks so much for joining me and to talk about coaching Unpeeled, which I've been very excited about. I hope you two are too. I know our audience is as well. We want to understand a little bit about how you guys came to collaborate on this, and then a little bit about first, before we get stuck into the meat, or what should we say, the zest of the matter, we will first, I want to understand about what you feel that the fundamental need is. So can one of you first tell me the tale of how you guys kind of came to start collaborating first?
Can I take that one, Joanne?
I was going to say, take that one, Joe.
Well, we already knew each other and we'd had conversations, and Joanne had been a guest on my podcast, and we knew that we shared some thoughts around the role of coaching in physiotherapy. But what we didn't realise is that both of us had started doing a little bit of work independently on the idea of some kind of course to incorporate the skills into physio. And we had a chat, and we were kind of like, oh, you're doing that too, and we're quite excited about the fact that each other were doing it. But we were also, right from the get-go, really honest with each other that whilst we liked collaborating with people, we're also both quite independent, and both quite used to leading things. So we were kind of like, is this going to work? But I don't know if it's our age, our stage of career, or just our commitment to being totally upfront about that from the word go. It's been brilliant because we've kind of realised we can collaborate and still be independent and still respect each other and still work things out and disagree about things. So it came about almost because it made sense, and we've worked out how to make it work with some initial reservations, which I hope Joanne agrees, certainly from my point of view, have gone. And we find we're definitely better than the sum of our parts when we get together. We have found we need to be in person, though, haven't we, Joanne? Generally, to get the really good stuff.
Oh, wait, it works way better over coffee and cake. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm sorry to not be with you in coffee and cake then now as well, but needs must for us to stream something. But Joanne, I'll come to you then to try, if you can, to frame what you felt between you was the emergent need. So what is it about coaching and your own journeys with coaching that's made you feel that this is a real useful thing for people to understand, and what's the problem?
Right, Jack. Well, as you know, and probably a lot of people listening know, I've been teaching for a long, long time now. And because of the way that GEMS are structured, I come to know people very well. And it's been all the way along in GEMS, it's the coaching aspect has been built in. But then during the pandemic, when we went online and the content delivery could be pre-recorded, I've spent a lot more time with people hearing basically the same things over and over again. Joe and I both hear them, the same stresses, the same worries, the same pain points. And of course, it's amplified. And it's showing in the research papers that are being generated in terms of physiotherapist burnout, physiotherapist exhaustion. And it's not just about the situation, because we tend to think it's just the context, change the context and this will go away, but it's not actually true. And it's not just a case of building in more me time. There's just so much that can be done in how we frame and manage the situation or the interaction that can really smooth out a lot of the issues that therapists come with over and over again. The issues of over responsibility, the exhaustion. How do I get my patient on board? I'm worried that the patient expects this, and I'm worried that they're not satisfied. I mean, the same things over and over again. And the coaching principles that Jo and I have been streamlining from all of the educations that we've done and streamlined for clinicians can really speak to those struggles. And so we just, kind of got together and went, each in our own way, we're already dealing with this, but actually collectively, can we create something that's super simple in its way, but something that can help people to move from the struggle point, which stops everything, back into motion again and into action in a way that just feels a whole lot calmer and less self-judgy, which is what tends to happen.
Right.
Like that self-judgment, that self kind of, I'm not living up to my expectations and I'm struggling thing. That's the thing that I think we both have a real commitment to for the well-being side, because we're losing great people, and I just would love to believe that we don't have to.
Yeah, there's some real consequences if we don't resolve this or find ways to resolve this, aren't there? With the incredible talent leaving the profession and the industry at large. Jo, I've got a couple of follow-up questions. Before I do, I just wonder if you had anything further to add to that, especially with regards to that observant need.
Yeah, I think what Joanne's just said really talks about addressing the root cause, not the symptoms. So lots of people will know me from my activities around MEHAB, which could be said a lot of the time to be dealing with the outcome, the feelings of burnout and overwhelm and inadequacy. And I think along the way, I realized that the coaching skills were a way of, as Joanne's just hinted at, preventing the development of the problem to an extent. Not completely, but we know from basic physiotherapy, don't we? If we get the opportunity to go back and try and change the pathway that's led to the injury, then we've got much less remedial work to do later on. And I think exactly the same is true in this situation with us as clinicians and professionals. The process happens to be called coaching, but for me, it's the answer to overwork, over responsibility, burnout, feeling inadequate.
If we think about so on that root cause analysis, if I was to invite you both to give your general thoughts on what you feel the root causes are of those feelings of inadequacy, over self-scrutiny, burnout risk that you're describing, that has meant that then people get that expectation management piece sort of not in line with their patients. I just wondered how much of that is personal, social, cultural, all of the above.
Do you want to jump in, Jo?
Yeah, I feel a bit responsible as a generation, maybe unfairly, but it feels a bit like I'm from the generation that bred the problem. And I don't take personal responsibility for it necessarily.
I blame you personally.
Do you? Fair enough. Okay.
Just fire.
Your root cause is me. I feel like I experienced the development of the problem in myself in my very first job, and in my training at university. So I completely swallowed the pill of your job is to hear all the problem, find a diagnosis, learn all the recipes or the fixes for all these diagnoses, get on with it. If it's not working, it's your fault. And I had a couple of seniors that quite successfully reinforced that illusion for me when I was younger. And I don't know if that is true. I mean, I have to say the young physios that I speak to today seem to be coming out with quite similar senses of responsibility. So I'm not sure it's changed, but I kind of feels like I was in the generation where the problem started to grow, this sense of over responsibility, and maybe it's a throwback to the early days of physiotherapy and all the truths which we're now grappling with, but at the time, we're taught as absolute truths. For me personally, in my career, it feels like that's where it started. I expected a lot of myself because I felt I'd learnt that was the expectation of me, and if I wasn't fulfilling on that, then the problem was probably me.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, Joanne, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it just, a lot of people, when actually asked in a bit more depth, say, well, I did qualify with the belief that I was qualifying to be the expert. My job is to fix people. And my job then is to get it right. And if I'm not getting it, whatever right is, I guess right is to get some kind of outcome happening, then I'm failing. And of course, the whole thing is predicated on complete fiction, because we cannot know with a complex human being all the factors, no matter how good your, or how extensive your initial evaluation is. There are a lot of factors in play, and we aren't that realistic about that. So, this business of being the expert fixer and therefore I am responsible for the outcome, is really, really prevalent. And I hear it all the time when people show up on courses and say, oh, I should have done this better, or I should have picked. And it's just like, why should you have? Like, did you have a great reason for what you picked? And they're like, well, yeah, this was my reasoning. I'm like, so great. That was a great start point. The fact that it didn't bring about the exact result you were hoping for doesn't necessarily make it a problem of your execution. It means that you've hit something unexpected. And then we go, okay, that's a new piece of information. So what do I glean from this to then inform my next step? It doesn't mean we turn it back on ourselves and go, oh, I should have known more. I should have done better. And all those scripts that we run as perfectionists.
It's very medical. It's very orthopedic medical, even. It's find it, fix it, forget it, right? Next. And I think I've always struggled to find a discipline of which it apply to, but it's certainly, we kind of know inherently that MSK practice is not mathematics. But what is it? And it's probably more like the law than it is mathematics, at least, in a sense that these things are negotiated, they're exploratory, they're interpretive. And so whilst I'm still exploring and trying to work out exactly what discipline it's more like than mathematics, I'm landing on law for now. But I wondered if you had a brilliant podcast with Matt Phillips, who is a great friend of mine and a great interviewer and storyteller. And I want to signpost people to that because I think that will cover some great ground that we might not get to today. But in it, there were some lovely points whereby you described awkward moments, and you felt like that maybe you'd been inspired somewhat by people describing awkward moments, blocks, barriers, areas of discomfort that on examination you guys felt that like people don't deserve to feel this way, that kind of skin crawly awkwardness that they just don't deserve. So can you just give me some insights into that, please? Because it seems like it inspired some of this work.
Do you want to go, Joanne, on this one?
Sure. In terms of awkward moments, just picking up a couple of the things that, I was just literally just this weekend did my first 2 live face-to-face gigs with practitioners since 2019. So we had a bit of catching up to do. But what was really evident was the same themes are coming through, but more so. So, the issue of, how do I get my patient, like my least favorite term, how do I sell it to the patient? I'm like, what do you mean sell it? And then the other side of that was like, how do we get patient compliance? I'm like, okay, so let's just be clear about what that is. And Joe and I have come up with a model of 5 pillars that we can draw from. So one of those is agreements. And it's just like, well, the thing about compliance goes away when the two of you have come to an agreement about understanding where we are and how we're moving forward, and that we keep coming back to that agreement to check in with each other, because that then also gives us some way of dealing with the whole, oh my gosh, am I meeting my patient's expectations, and stressing about it. One person was just like, oh, and I'm like, what could you do? And they're looking at me blankly. I'm like, and then they went, I could ask them. I'm like, yes, we could ask them, and it's just like, I mean, it sounds self-evident once you bring it out, but it isn't part of common practice. So it sounds really simple. It's not. It needs a little bit of framing, but once you actually see the frame, you realize, oh, there is actually a bunch of stuff I could do here that takes away some of this issue of expectations and compliance once you know how to frame it. So that's one of them.
Definitely. No, Jo, I was so tempted to bring your relative in as a cameo then.
That was
that
like
would have been very me, very chewing it over. But
that was like the lockdown baby.
Let it smooth. Yeah, I thought that. Yeah, brilliant. But
that was my mother looking for her spare key.
I see. Well, I'm sorry to have not drawn her in, really. But if it had been the delivery driver, I definitely would. So, if you've got your composure, have you got any more to add to?
I'm still well within my awkward moment. I don't think I've moved on. My mum just came in then to illustrate unpredictability and flexibility in the moment. So
I wanted her to come in and make some sort of unnecessary demand on you that we could reflect on. But no, go on.
She's an ex-physio, if that helps. You could have brought her on.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, I was half listening to what Joanne said, so apologies if I repeat what she just said. But I did, the moment where Joanne said, oh, we could ask. I do quite a bit of work with our more junior physio at the moment, and so many times when we're talking, I'll say to him, well, have you asked the patient, could you bring that awkward thing out in the open? So things like, we've had a couple of treatments and I'm not quite sure if I'm doing what the patient expected me to do. I'm not quite sure if we're heading in the right direction. And 9 times out of 10, my answer is, well, why don't you talk about it? And for communicators, it amazes me how infrequently that is our go-to. I suspect socially, if we with a friend and there's a situation we think, oh, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, I'm just going to ask them. I suspect personality-wise, we're probably likely to be the one in the friendship to go, should we just talk about this thing? But when you're in that funny, slightly weird physio patient expert recipient role, we seem to get a bit in our heads about that. Like we can't just suddenly bring something out in the open and deal with it here. We seem to think that assumption is going to get us through on both sides. I mean, poor patient, it's not their job to normalize things. They're in an unusual situation, and really the onus is on us to show that there is a pathway through, and say, come on, we can talk about this. If this doesn't feel right, or I'm getting a sense that you might be feeling this. Are you? The answer might be yes or no, but it's so much more helpful just to bring stuff into conversation, which for me really is what coaching is.
Getting the cards on the table and various other analogies that I overuse. People, I think they kind of do under-negotiate various elements of their lives. But one of the things that I think this revealed to me when observing some of the same things, of course, it'd be a really uncomfortable bandwagon for me to say, oh yeah, I've observed all the same things, done absolutely nothing about it. So of course, there's plenty of stuff that you guys have touched on that I think is absolutely necessary, and something that you've joined the dots on that me and others might have spotted morsels of, but not the whole sandwich. But I think in this instance, people definitely, it's almost like the shallowness of the consent that they've assumed has kind of been realized by this. They kind of, if you've not laid out what this is going to look like, what it is you're getting them to consent for, what it is you're getting them to pay for, then actually there is a duty of care for you to lean into that discomfort a little bit, because actually we as we've, you've rightly identified, if anything, that's the thing that's going to unlock that discomfort. It's not that you've got to then hold it and live with it. It's actually that's going to resolve it. But even if it didn't, that's tough luck, really. That is an important part of how and what you've consented them for. And to have missed that chapter, that is a failure of education. But it's also a really interesting thing about that power dynamic, and about that us constantly falling into this sort of healer thing, and that we need to be that. Who says? And when did you agree to that? When did you consent to be a healer? When did you to be consent to be put in that box? And you probably didn't. And so let's negotiate. Let's on individual levels, as well as then thinking consciously about how we might market ourselves, how we might behave, where we might focus our attention on our own coaching to try and resolve it. So anyway, I'm going off on one, but feel free to disagree if you need
There's
to.
a good point.
Oh, sorry, Kate, Joe.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go.
It's a good point, Jack, because I think people raise this point all the time when talking about coaching. People often say, but my patient just tells me they just want to be fixed. They don't want to have a chat with me, and they just want their pain to go away. And that's completely understandable. Therefore, I think it's even more important in the early stages to, as you say, lay your cards out and negotiate how this process is going to be, because it, there's a lot of talk of just give the patient what they want. That isn't coaching. Coaching is having a conversation early around, okay, what are you expecting? Okay, here's my thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on that? And years before I discovered coaching, I would frequently start my consultations explaining how I generally work, just in case that's completely opposite to the expectation, which quite often it was. And it didn't mean we didn't get to a really good place, but had I not had that conversation first, we'd have been straight into awkwardness and misunderstanding.
To give you an example of a patient I've had recently. So the patient arrived, and I knew she was going to be a complex chronic patient, but the reality was so much more than what you could possibly have expected. And partway through the evaluation, which is about the time that a therapist starts to feel really anxious about, am I going to get anything done here? Because haven't we all had that? How am I going to do this and get a treatment done? And it's just about that time, and this is what we want to help people recognize. When you get that awkward moment and you feel it, that's the time at which you go, okay, so here's the situation. I've gleaned this information, but what I can see is that in order to be able to take us in the best possible direction, I'm going to have to spend some time getting the rest of the information. Is that okay with you, that we spend our time doing that today so we can have a really clear plan for when we get back together again? And then the patient gets a choice, and there's an agreement there. So we don't get to the end of the session going, oh, the patient's not going to be happy. I haven't, done X, Y, and Z. It's just like, I've actually laid it right out there on the table, because I know that, yes, I could do the patient pleasing thing and not really complete the examination to the extent I need to in order to do something thinking it's going to make them happy. Or I can lay it on the table and say, this is actually going to be important because you actually want something to change. So for us to be able to make the best, well, I'm not going to say decision, but you've gathered all the information. This is the most likely route to help us get there. Given that we've already talked about what it is that they're actually wanting, what's meaningful, they get a chance to go, actually, yeah, I'd rather spend this time because I actually now understand what's going on much more. I never did that before. And so, again, it's like recognizing those moments and then going, oh, that's one of those moments. This is probably a transparency moment in order to get agreement so that we both know where we are and the patient's not wondering, so are we going to get to the treatment part? And the therapist is going, are they thinking we're going to get to the treatment part? But I can't really do that ethically because we haven't actually got all the facts. And the whole thing can just go away. Again, it's not like it's the thing with all of this stuff that Joe and I are putting together, all of it can be actioned straight away. It's just understanding what someone once described as a squeaky butt moment that comes along. knowing what that is, and then realizing, oh, this is one of those moments. I have a tool for that.
And if you set the scene and set that context, then it just decreases the likelihood of it happening, but also gives you that ability to re-reference to what that was. And so remember the corridor conversations that I was taught, some of the most powerful things I was taught by mentors, including Mike Stewart, who was a big early influence in my career, still a great friend and mentor of mine, but just observed by long corridor that we had, Margate Hospital, if anyone knows it, right? And we're walking down there, and I just happened to be picking my patient up not long behind Mike, and just noticing that I was walking along, just literally just showing the patient where they were going, whereas Mike was already deep in conversation about various things. And it weren't just about icebreakers. At first I thought it was, but I noticed that whatever he might have been icebreaking about, whether it be the weather or the football shirt they might have been wearing, at some point in that interaction, he said, today's a bit of a finding out session. I want to understand as much about you as I can and understand what you're after and what you're looking for, because then we can try and work on that together. And a version of that was then described amongst all other things. I'm describing this corridor as like a mile long, aren't I now? But I'm just meaning like amongst it, he always asked that. And it was just that was obviously genius. And I didn't know until I started doing it and realizing that he's just explained what they're going to do and why they're going to do it, because the more he can understand and the more he understands their goals, then that's exactly what the whole interaction is. And so I'd then hear between the curtains the fact that he would then at some points take stock, especially the complexity of the patients you can imagine Mike Stewart was seeing. So he was able to take stock and say, well, remember, I really want to understand as much as I can about you and stuff, and we're going to move towards that. But if I had a magic wand with me, of course I'd be looking to fix it, but that's not really why you're here. And you could see him able to use his humor because he was able to back reference to the context that he'd set. And whilst, it's only one example, it's something that people take for granted, and that learning the skills that will help to set that foundation is best noticed. I didn't notice till years later that is actually in a coaching framework. And I think it took for me to be working with and observing your work, Jo Turner, for me to realize, that the best exemplification of that, if you needed to put a name on it or have a category on it, is coaching, which I can so imagine and understand why you guys would collaborate on something like this, because it is such a crying out need, as you've described it. Can you give me insights into, I almost feel like you might have been spoke for choice, right? Because this is such a big topic. So I'm fascinated by what then coaching Unpeeled is and what it does and things like that. So can you give me a sense of the product, the course, and what that entails for me?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jack. We looked at it and thought, okay, we are not looking to train people to be coaches. We need to try and sift out the bits that are most relevant to clinical practice and can be most immediately used in a practical sense. And Joanne and I have both done some additional training beyond our foundational training with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and they have quite a comprehensive set of, they call them core competencies. Now within that, there's too much for what we wanted to do, but we took those kind of as a baseline, started talking about them, had a great big document where we tried to work out which bits were actually directly relevant to a clinical scenario. And then we gradually distilled these down into 5 what we call pillars. Joanne, if it's okay with you, I will name them. I don't think that's giving too much away. So our 5 pillars are partnering, agreements, anchoring, evoking awareness, and something called GSC, which is gathering, sifting, and what's the C, Joanne? Confirming. And
you just really wanted it to be 5 and not 8, didn't you? You've made number 5 a 3. I love that.
Well, didn't have time for it.
Brilliant. You just really didn't want it to be 8. Okay.
So the structure is around those 5 pillars, and the Coaching Unpeeled course is based around an initial weekend where we will essentially teach those pillars, but with constant, role play and breakout rooms, and straight into what clinical scenario does this relate to. Go and have a practice at it. And then there's a 3-week period for people to go and practice in real time with their patients, and then come back and have some mentoring. But we felt really strongly that the practice time and the not role play, but the breakout room stuff is so important, because when you hear the principles, it sounds simple, and it is simple. But what isn't simple is those words coming out of your mouth in the clinic room, because they're different to the ones that normally come out, and the responses that come back are different. And the skill is in learning to navigate that scenario. So we were really keen that it wasn't just us teaching a load of stuff and then hoping that people manage to put that to some practical use with their patients and not being able to follow up with them.
Yeah, brilliant. I can so see how that would start to piece together. Joanne, what do you feel it is about coaching Unpeeled that makes it so unique? Because obviously, I mean, to me, it sounds so unique in every which way. But I just wonder if you could feel, because you've taught and still continue to teach so many different things in different ways. But what is it about this that makes it a unique offering?
I think that people are banding about the idea of coaching and trying to bring it into therapies. But the thing is that between the two of us, the actual number of hours of really, really intimately working with therapists, working with clinicians, hearing their struggles, we know them inside out. These are our people. And we are basically bringing, instead of accidentally stumbling on like an insight like you stumbled on with Mike, Jack, instead of just hoping to stumble on something, what we're doing is saying, sure, let's make these things actually explicit for you. This is a toolkit. It's not this onerous new body of work that's going to be really hard to understand. Far from it. It's like, okay, let's talk about when it feels hard, because you're all going to come up with the same thing. It feels hard then. We know about that. So both of us have spent a lot of time coaching and a lot of time knowing that framework. But we also have an absolutely huge, I've been working with clinicians for 25 years now. And Jo's been doing all her deep work with her one-to-one coaching and all of those kinds of things. So I don't think that there's anybody who could probably bring this in the way that we do, but also with the educator's mind. How do we make this easy for you to actually take it into clinic tomorrow? It needs to be not too much brain, easy to put into place, needs practice, but can it change your practice tomorrow? That's what we're after.
And these things can be really powerful experiences, because often, from what I've observed, including in myself, that some of the perception that we've ended up complying with and the expectation that we've not been resetting with our patients is sometimes based on a sort of deep-rooted sense of duty, of sometimes underlying insecurities based on sometimes very specific things, sometimes really broad things. And so I just look on at the format you've created, which has this really lovely hybrid model that then doesn't think that this is a set of things that can be perfectly acquired by a few teaching modules or webinars, right? It's something that needs to be grounded and practiced, but then also can be enhanced by the natural communities that you both create within your other content that will enhance and allow for that practice work to develop. I think that's where I can see how thoughtful it's been designed, is that it's taking the best of both models, because the downside of in-person is purely the onerous nature of the time it would take to then create what it might be a network of 4-5 weekends. I mean, this is a subject matter that is rich enough to absolutely fill that sort of time frame and be valuable at that. But of course, the investment both in time and money for that would be challenging for every party. So instead, it's about trying to recognize, right, how can we make sure we ground it appropriately in the first instance, but then enhance it through that community work and using virtual tools. So it's such an exciting proposition. Before I forget to, because I'd be guilty of, I'm going to pull this up. It's going to go all over our faces there. Look, this is a QR code. I need you to whip your phones out of your pockets if you're watching this now, because you'll only forget, just as I nearly forgot to put it up on screen. Scan this QR code and have a little look at Coaching Unpeeled, because it's something that I needn't take that off yet. It is something that is so likely to be for you, potentially for colleagues, it's something that if it's not for you now, it might be in the future. I need you to go away and reflect on some of those awkward, uncomfortable moments that we've just described. I will put some links in the show notes and the descriptions when this goes out on socials. We've ended up streaming live, amusingly, just because I thought I'd scheduled it on this software and it's gone live. But that means it's gone out on social. So you lucky few that have seen it on social media, then that's great. But it will go through on the podcast feeds next week as is scheduled on our weekly show. And so if you've been lucky enough to get it on the early feeds, then you might want to snap up the tickets to the event. Just tell us a little bit about when it is. Certainly, because it's a cohort type system, isn't it? But when's it start off?
Our first weekend is June the 7th and 8th, and then the follow-up one is 3 weeks after that. I can't remember the exact date, but a Saturday 3 weeks after that is the second one. But it's all on that. If they scan that QR code, the details are all there.
Yeah, no, I just think I can already think about the ways in which that work will be chatted about and enhanced through various different channels of support as well. I know that when I think about how this is compatible with the Me Hubbers, as well as then other elements and nurture within our Physio Matters audience as well, it just crosses over so brilliantly. And I'm so glad to see you guys getting together. I know that I've been watching. I don't know why. I just want to assure people that if you're going to collaborate interprofessionally, you don't have to share a name. So you two have done it. Claire Minshall and Claire Robertson have just done it. It's just a weird thing where it has to be exactly the same name. But it's me and Jack March, I suppose you could say as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're both Jacks. So yeah,
I think you just disproved your point. You do have to have the same name, so just don't bother collaborating with anyone that hasn't got the same name as you.
Three success stories there, so maybe that's what it does.
We're not
Joe squared.
Are we? We're not square at all, though. It doesn't work.
Absolutely. You're having a lot of fun with the citrus fruits, aren't you? With this Unpeeled, which
yes.
I'm really enjoying for branding. So no,
I wanted that to be my answer to what makes it different.
Oh, nice. Yeah, of course. It's zesty. So anything else that I've forgotten to mention or you want to mention before we wrap up?
No, I think I need to go and find my mother's door key. So nothing else.
For me, it's just that the point of this is that clinicians are good people who do deserve to actually feel okay about themselves. And so many people are not feeling okay, but not realizing they don't have to feel that way. And that is a really explicit kind of reason for Jo and I to be doing coaching Unpeeled.
That's a lovely place for us to finish, isn't it? Yeah, it doesn't have to feel this way. And you deserve better than to be torturing yourself over these expectations. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing. I'm so excited to see how it all goes. Please do tune in. That QR code just quickly before I go. But then we're just going to smile and wave as the music plays. So bye, folks. See you later.